On an evening in early March, the quiet suburban neighborhood of Willow Creek, nestled in the rolling hills of Colorado, was blanketed in stillness. The streetlights cast a soft, golden glow over the cul-de-sac where the Dawson family lived in their spacious two-story home. Inside, the house was warm and inviting, filled with the faint echoes of children's laughter that had only recently faded as they drifted off to sleep. At 9 p.m., 31-year-old Lena Dawson finished tucking her three young sons, Noah, 9, Liam, 7, and Owen, 5, into their beds. She smoothed their blankets, kissed their foreheads, and whispered a soft good night before quietly stepping out of their rooms. The house settled into a peaceful silence as she made her way downstairs to the kitchen, her socked feet padding softly against the cool hardwood floors. Lena was buzzing with excitement. Earlier that day, she had received the kind of news that could change everything. Her small but growing real estate company was on the verge of closing a deal for a breathtaking 20,000-square-foot mansion in Aspen, listed at $2 million. With a few strategic renovations, she knew she could flip it for $3 million, making a staggering $1 million profit. This was the break she had been working toward for years. Eric, her husband, was a rugged and hard-working man who ran a successful masonry business. Their life together had been comfortable, filled with annual vacations to tropical destinations and the perks of an affluent lifestyle. But Lena had always wanted more. She didn't just want to be a stay-at-home mom, even though that had been the expectation. When their boys were younger, she had put her career ambitions on hold, but now, with the help of a live-in nanny, she was finally able to pursue her dreams in real estate. She poured 2 glasses of sparkling cider. Eric wasn't much of a drinker, and called out for him. A moment later, he appeared in the kitchen doorway, his broad frame filling the space. His dark hair was slightly tousled from a long day at work, and his usual warm smile greeted her. "You look like you're about to burst," Eric teased, taking the glass she handed him. Lena grinned, her eyes sparkling. "Come upstairs. I have something to tell you." They retreated to their bedroom, sitting side by side on the edge of their king-sized bed. Lena could hardly contain her excitement as she revealed the details of the deal. Eric's eyes lit up with pride as she spoke, and he clinked his glass against hers. "This is amazing, Lena. All your hard work is paying off," he said, pulling her into a quick embrace. But as they talked, Eric's energy began to wane. Earlier that day, he had received an allergy shot, and it had left him feeling unusually fatigued. His eyelids grew heavy, and he stifled a yawn. "I think I need to call it a night," he admitted, rubbing his temples. Lena nodded in understanding. "Me too. It's been a long day." They brushed their teeth, changed into pajamas, and climbed into bed. Just as Eric reached to turn off the lamp, a faint cry echoed from down the hall. Lena groaned. "Liam's having another nightmare." Eric exhaled, already half asleep. "You want me to go?" "No, I've got it." She kissed his cheek before slipping out of bed. Lena padded down the hallway to Liam's room, where her 7-year-old was sitting up in bed, his eyes wide with fear. "Bad dream?" she asked softly. Liam nodded, his lower lip trembling. She climbed into bed beside him, stroking his hair until his breathing steadied. Before long, the rhythmic rise and fall of his chest told her he was asleep again. She stayed a little longer, just to be sure, before carefully untangling herself and tiptoeing back to her room. When she returned, Eric was sprawled on his back, the covers kicked off. She chuckled to herself. He always ran hot at night, and slid in beside him, pulling the blankets up over both of them. But as she settled against him, a sudden chill ran down her spine. Eric's skin was ice cold. Her heart lurched. She sat up, shaking him. "Eric." No response. Panic began to rise in her throat. "Eric, wake up." His body was limp, unresponsive. Terror seized her. She scrambled for her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed 911. "My husband. He's not breathing. He's cold. Please, hurry, she sobbed into the phone. Within minutes, sirens wailed outside. Lena flung open the front door, her entire body shaking as paramedics rushed in. But when they reached Eric, their faces fell. It was already too late. The days that followed were a blur of shock and grief. The official cause of death was a mystery at first. Eric had been the picture of health, an avid runner, hiker, and outdoorsman. Just the day before, he had completed an 8-mile jog without issue. Police found an old prescription painkiller bottle on the nightstand, but it had been empty for months. When questioned, Lena mentioned Eric's allergy shot, but even she admitted it seemed unlikely to have caused his death. Suicide was ruled out quickly. Eric had no history of depression, and his life had been full of joy, coaching his son's soccer games, planning future family trips, and celebrating Lena's recent success. With no clear answers, the investigation stalled. Meanwhile, Lena focused on her boys. The loss of their father left a gaping hole in their lives. Noah, the oldest, understood death but struggled with the finality of it. Liam kept asking if his dad could still see him from heaven. Owen, the youngest, simply didn't understand why Daddy wasn't coming home. Desperate to help them cope, Lena began telling them stories at bedtime. Tales of Eric as a guardian angel, watching over them, listening to their prayers. She drew pictures to go along with the stories, sketching Eric with wings and a halo, smiling down at his sons. Night after night, the ritual brought them comfort. And then, an idea struck her. What if other grieving children could benefit from this? She began compiling the stories and illustrations into a book, pouring her heart into the project. 6 weeks after Eric's death, she self-published Are You With Me? On Amazon. To her surprise, it took off. Parents of grieving children left glowing reviews, and soon, media outlets were reaching out for interviews. Lena, though hesitant at first, agreed, partly to honor Eric's memory, partly because she truly believed the book could help others. But what she didn't know was that her sudden publicity was about to unravel a dark secret. For months, detectives had been combing through the Dawsons' electronic devices, searching for any clue about how Eric could have ingested a lethal dose of fentanyl. Then, they found something disturbing. On the night Eric died, someone in the house had searched how to destroy electronic evidence and luxury prisons for the wealthy. The searches had been deleted, but not well enough. Then, after Lena's book gained attention, tips began flooding in. Friends, family, and even distant acquaintances reached out to police, all saying the same thing: Eric didn't overdose. He was murdered. And they all pointed to one person. On May 8, 2023, nearly a year after Eric's death, police arrested Lena Dawson at her home. Prosecutors laid out their case. Lena had been secretly draining Eric's bank accounts and taking out massive loans in their name. When Eric discovered the fraud, he confronted her and began divorce proceedings, cutting off her access to their finances. Desperate, Lena took out a $2 million life insurance policy on Eric. Then, she began experimenting with fentanyl. On Valentine's Day, she had given him a poisoned sandwich, but it only made him break out in hives. Undeterred, she tried again on March 3rd, spiking his drink with a fatal dose while they celebrated her real estate deal. After he collapsed, she waited hours before calling 911, spending that time researching how to cover her tracks. And then, in a twisted twist of irony, she wrote a children's book about grief, profiting from the very death she had caused. Lena maintains her innocence, but the evidence against her is damning. As she awaits trial, Are You With Me? Has been pulled from shelves. And Eric's family is left with one haunting question: how could someone who claimed to love him so much be capable of such evil? The truth, it seems, was far darker than anyone could have imagined. The kitchen was quiet except for the clink of ice cubes as Lena stirred the Moscow Mule, her fingers trembling slightly around the copper mug. The ginger beer fizzed as she poured it over the vodka, the lime wedge bobbing to the surface like an afterthought. She hesitated for just a second, long enough to glance at the photo on the fridge of Eric and the boys at last summer's camping trip, their faces sunburnt and grinning, before reaching into her pocket. The tiny bag of powder was nearly weightless, but it carried the heft of everything she was about to destroy. She tore it open with her teeth, poured it in, and watched it disappear without a trace. Eric had been in a good mood all evening, ever since she'd called him downstairs to celebrate her big news. He'd always been her biggest cheerleader, even when her real estate ventures floundered, even when his masonry business carried them through lean years. That was the cruelest part. He would have forgiven her the embezzlement if she'd just come clean. But she couldn't risk it. Not when the divorce papers were already drafted, not when he'd quietly moved half their savings into an account only he could access. She'd seen the paperwork in his briefcase last week, buried beneath the boys' little league schedules. Now, as she handed him the drink, his calloused fingers brushed hers, warm and familiar. "To your $1 million deal," he said, clinking his mug against hers. She forced herself to take a sip, the ginger burning her throat. Eric drained half of his in one go. For a while, everything felt normal. They sat on the edge of their bed, knees touching, as she gushed about the mansion's marble floors and mountain views. But then his sentences started trailing off. His eyelids fluttered. When he stood to change into pajamas, he swayed like he'd had 3 drinks instead of 3 sips. "You okay?" she asked, steadying him with a hand on his arm. "Just that damn allergy shot," he muttered, rubbing his bicep. "Made me feel like crap all day." He collapsed onto the mattress, groaning as he rolled onto his back. Lena busied herself in the bathroom, brushing her teeth with exaggerated care, spitting mint foam into the sink. When she came out, Eric's breathing had already turned ragged. His chest rose and fell in shallow hitches, his lips tinged blue at the edges. She stood there, watching, until his fingers stopped twitching against the sheets. Then she got to work. First, the mug. She rinsed it twice in the en-suite sink, scrubbing the copper with her fingernail. Next, his phone. She typed in his passcode, Liam's birthday, and deleted the last hour of messages, nothing incriminating, but she couldn't be sure. Then she opened the browser and hesitated. How long does fentanyl stay in the system? She typed, then immediately erased it. Better to stick to practicalities, luxury prisons in America, and how to permanently delete search history. A whimper from down the hall froze her mid-search. Liam. Of course, the kid had nightmares like clockwork. She shoved Eric's phone under his pillow and hurried to her son's room, where he was sitting up, rubbing his eyes. "I dreamed Daddy fell off the mountain," he whispered. Lena gathered him into her arms, inhaling the little boy's smell of his shampoo. "Sure, Daddy's fine." She rocked him until his breathing evened out, then stayed another 20 minutes just to be safe. When she returned to her bedroom, the digital clock read 2:47 a.m. Eric hadn't moved. She pressed 2 fingers to his wrist. No pulse. His skin had gone waxy, his mouth slack. The reality of it hit her then, a physical punch to the gut. She'd done it. He was really gone. She waited another 37 minutes before calling 911. Long enough to rehearse her lines, "He was fine when I left him," to splash water on her face, and to bite the inside of her cheek until she tasted blood. When the dispatcher answered, she unleashed the perfect, panicked scream of a woman who'd just found her husband dead. The paramedics bought it. The cops didn't. It was the browser history that undid her in the end. Not the searches she'd made after, but the ones from weeks earlier, buried in the cache. Fentanyl dosage chart, does life insurance pay out for overdose, and how to fake grief. And then there was the book. Are You With Me? It started as a coping mechanism, a way to quiet the boys' relentless questions about heaven. But as the weeks passed and the police investigation stalled, Lena saw its potential. The manuscript poured out of her in a guilty fever, angelic illustrations of Eric, saccharine prose about loss, all of it crafted to make her look like the heartbroken widow instead of the woman who'd murdered her children's father for a $2 million payout. The day the first box of author copies arrived, she held one to her chest like a talisman. She'd done it. She'd won. Then the doorbell rang. Detective Holloway stood on the porch, flanked by 2 uniforms. Behind them, a news van idled at the curb. "Lena Dawson," he said, though they'd spoken a dozen times before. Her grip tightened on the book in her hands. "Yes. We need you to come with us." Upstairs, a door creaked open. "Mom." Noah's voice, groggy with sleep. Lena's throat closed. She couldn't let them see this. Couldn't let them. Holloway stepped forward. "We have a warrant for your arrest." The world tilted. She barely registered the click of handcuffs or the way her knees buckled as they led her away. The last thing she heard was Owen's tiny voice from the top of the stairs. "Mommy? Where are you going?" The book tumbled from her hands as they pushed her into the squad car. It landed face up on the pavement, the cover gleaming under the morning sun, Eric's angelic face smiling up at her, forever frozen in the lie she'd created.